Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me thank you for being here. The stories on this podcast are meant to let you know that you're not alone in what you're going through, and that we can all find strength in struggle with the right perspective. If you've been enjoying the podcast, let me ask that you leave a review on your platform of choice to help us grow so that we can continue to make the world a better place, one conversation at a time. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 71. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very special guest out in New York, Brian Mazza. Brian, what's going on, man?
How are you, buddy? Thank you for having me on.
I am doing great. Thank you for being here. We got connected through a mutual friend of ours, Todd Cuccia, and Todd's episode 60 of the podcast, and he's got so much wisdom, so much energy, and so much drive, and I know you're the same, so super excited to talk. Just to kick it off, you've been on the cover of Men's Health magazine twice, to my understanding. Can you explain how that happened?
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, everything you said about Todd is right. He's such a good dude. Me and him go way back. I think I was telling you 4 or 5 years old. So yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be on two covers of Men's Health magazine throughout my career. Being in New York and, being an owner of a hospitality group at the time and really having a very popular couple establishments in New York City. And during that time was also the boutique fitness boom in New York City. I kind of positioned myself and aligned myself strategically with proper brands and meeting the right people and doing all the right things, networking. And at that time, I got friendly with a bunch of people from Men's Health and went to a couple of events of theirs, and they came to a couple of events that I was hosting. And it was kind of, an anomaly to be very fit and run restaurants and bars and nightclubs and stuff. So they were kind of like enamored by the situation. This guy doesn't drink, but he has crazy bars. What's going on? He has a six-pack. He's in really good shape. He's doing all of these things aesthetically on the outside. And maybe there's more to it, hopefully on the inside, which I hope so. But I just really aligned myself with the right people. And then when I saw there was opportunity to either audition for something or opportunity to have the right meeting and meet the right people who make decisions, it was very easy for me to do that because of just how I positioned myself living in New York City.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was speaking with a client of mine before getting on this podcast, and he said, ask Brian how he does so many different things and makes it look so smooth. And I was curious from your perspective if it feels smooth behind the scenes, because you have a lot going on.
Yeah, there is a lot going on. It's not always smooth. I would be a big liar on here if I said like, oh, you just have to wake up early and ice bath and do this and that and life is great. I can't stand people like that because we all know that majority of people are disasters. The majority of large successful companies are disasters behind the scenes. I'm not saying I'm a disaster, but I'm human. And I think relatable to people as well. There's really difficult times. I have 2 kids that are under 5 years old. I have a wife who has a crazy successful career as well. So do I sometimes want to pull my hair out? Sure. Do I want to sometimes run through a wall? Yes. But I would say that running and working out have become a good form of therapy for me. To allow me to keep it together as much as possible. Again, I think social media is so corny sometimes, and social media, it gives people the wrong impression that if you ice bath and sauna all day long and do this and do that, that your problems are just going to go away. That's not the truth. Some of the most successful athletes and most fit people in the world have just normal issues, right? This world is very difficult these days. But I would say routine is important. I would say, I don't drink. That's really important. I will have a glass of wine here and there, but I think setting myself up with small wins allows me to take on more than maybe the normal person. But it does get difficult sometimes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate the transparency. And, we kind of jumped over what it is that you do for the people listening to this podcast who don't know you. I noticed that the first thing in your Instagram bio is dad. So I'd be curious to hear how you would describe yourself to somebody who doesn't know who you are.
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I get this question a lot actually of where I live. Because people see me just running. So like in the summer, I run with just like my 10,000 distance shorts on, sometimes the 3 inchers or the 5 inchers. And I don't have a shirt on and I'm sweaty and tan. And I'm out there every single day, like clockwork on the same route. And usually see a lot of the same people. And now that my kids are, my kid is in kindergarten and my other son is in pre-K and all this stuff, now you get to start interacting with a lot of the people in the town. And that's the number one question I usually get. Like the FedEx guy stopped me the other day. He's like, dude, what do you do? And I get that a lot, right? People don't fully understand it is what I do, because it's really crazy, right? I literally only run for like an hour a day, maybe that, right? So it's like, just because I run for an hour a day doesn't mean I don't have a job, right? I mean, I just run at a time that's more convenient probably for me than it is for them. But to break it down in a nutshell, I help brands activate, I help brands market, I help brands grow and scale. I also have my own company that is a brand incubator called High Performance Lifestyle Training, which is a summit-based high performance fitness business where we incubate brands that either want to rebrand and get out to the public again, or if they're launching, we help them with their initial launch, usually throughout a time when we're about to have a summit, because the amount of content, impressions, and people that they get in front of usually helps them in a successful way. So that is one arm of the business, right? So we could say marketing, branding, incubating, doing Instagram, stuff like that. Then we have the high performance lifestyle training summits, right? So that's a really fun, successful business. So we do those summits 4 times a year throughout the US. We just had our first international summit 3 weeks ago. And that's, like I said, we incubate brands. We get really awesome speakers to come in, athletes, entrepreneurs, and the community is phenomenal of people coming in. And then we have an investment arm in the business where we invest in a lot of these brands as well. So in the health and wellness space, in brands that we think have a strong future, have strong founders, our belief systems are similar, good product for people, healthy product for people, and we will invest in them and hopefully help them as well, where it all becomes full circle. But yes, you're right. The first thing on my Instagram does say dad. And I believe when people do ask that question, if I were to lead with I'm a dad, it would be very probably obnoxious to them because they wouldn't look at it that way. But I look at it that way, that my first and foremost job is being a father. Being a very positive dad, a lead by example figure in my house. That's my number one job. It's my number one priority. And everything else that I do is just to make money. But first and foremost, yes, dad.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And growing up, I, on a personal level, dealt with quite a bit of tough stuff that I didn't necessarily get to choose. And I'm so grateful looking back that my dad and mom helped me see that I couldn't limit myself just because of circumstances. And it's led me to this place where I created Project Endure to help other people find strength in struggle, because I believe it's not about what happens to you, it's about how you respond. And so, leading with that, I want to ask you, looking back at your life, what's the hardest thing or circumstance that you've ever had to handle that you didn't get to choose for yourself?
Well, that's a really cool question, because I talk about this all the time, where it's like, I kind of have this complex on social media or complex in life that nothing really bad happened to me as a kid, or nothing real. I never really struggled with anything as a kid growing up, or in sports, or my household. I had really two very, very unconditionally loved, supportive parents, great brother and sister, very, very close still to this day. So I had this like, wow, I feel like something bad had to happen to me for me to go on social media and be like, oh, blah, blah, blah happened. So now I can do this. So it was always like, wow, I grew up, I had a very nice life growing up, and I'm very happy that I had that. But the way we grew up was very respect based. Never wanted to let my parents down, not out of fear, but just like I just didn't want to let them down, because they were kind of like homies also, but like very much so like there was a line drawn, like, I'm your parent, blah, blah, blah. Like my dad used to always say to me, and I catch myself saying this to my kids too sometimes, it's like, I'm not your friend, I'm your dad. And it's a lot easier for you to cry than it is for me to cry with certain things. That's what he used to always say to me, like if I was going out or things were getting a little hectic, and I was growing up and doing stuff like that. So yes, growing up, awesome family life, very supportive. Sports, very successful, always made the team, MVP, did all my thing there at soccer and other sports as well. Then I think as I got older, and maybe 18, 17, 18, that's when I started to have some adversity and hurdles, but maybe I didn't handle those situations so well because I didn't really get tested in a young age. Maybe, I don't know, but you can maybe draw back to that, and that's a cool correlation to maybe figure out. But I had some issues getting into school just with SAT scores and stuff like that, but still got a scholarship to go play ball at a really strong D1 school, so that worked out. Had some adversity with my college coaches, and I didn't handle that well. I handled that like a child, so that was something that I failed at there. And then that was like really it in college, right? On a broad picture. And then out of school, really no adversity, created a brand, really successful hospitality group. But I think until, starting to have kids was the first major hurdle, where, male factor infertility came into play. Didn't think we were going to have kids, had conversations with my wife to, why don't we divorce? Why don't we split up so you can go get pregnant with someone else and start a family? Because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you pregnant. Dealing with stuff like that. Finding out that I'm the issue, that we're not able to conceive naturally. Not feeling like a man, thinking, oh, I'm in great shape. I'm making insane money. Life is great, but I can't get my wife pregnant. Like, what is this? Just feeling mega empty inside. But then luckily through science and IVF, we were able to have two amazing kids. So dealt with that. During that pregnancy, we thought we almost lost our first son to complications, but that was just a missed test, which was crazy. So dealing with that again. And then I think, obviously that everyone knows this, my house had a really bad fire in 2020, almost lost my oldest kid. If I didn't get into the room within the minute or 2 minutes that I got into the room, he would have died with smoke inhalation, which would have been really scary, and obviously a totally different scenario of life now. I don't know, honestly, how I would live. But yeah, so we could talk about that story, which, that just happened. That just occurred, where you think your life is great and life is perfect and hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden your wife's like, hey, I think there's smoke in one of the hi-hats, go take a look. And I just got back from, I think it was an Under Armour trip with Dan Churchill, and just got back, and I was so tired, and I was like, I don't really want to go check. Can you just go check? And we had like an argument about it, and I was like, I'll just go upstairs. And my brother has a show on HGTV called Home Inspector Joe, and my sister called him, and I was like, just call my brother, he'll be able to sort us out over the phone. Let me go check on Leo. Actually, I was going to go check on Luke first, because he was the smaller baby. So as I was walking up the steps, my plan of action was to go check on Luke first in his room, because he's smaller. Thank God I did not, because his room had no smoke in it, because the fire didn't really ignite yet and kick in. But right when I got to the top step, of the landing, I hear, Daddy, I can't breathe. And that's when I went to Leo's room, and it was covered with black smoke. And I think he was in his sleep sack, so he couldn't even really move. And he's just in his crib, and you know, obviously know where your kid's stuff is in the crib. So I just grabbed him literally like by his back or his hair and got him out of his crib and brought him downstairs to my wife, and then checked Luke's room, and he had no smoke in it. So I actually left him in there for a couple minutes. And then the fire department came, and we're trying to find this fire and trying to sort this all out. And then we take Luke downstairs, and they walk into Leo's closet. And right when they walk into Leo's closet and step on the floorboard, flames shoot up, and fire everywhere, and then smoke everywhere. And the fire marshal looked at me and said, "Get your fucking family and your animals and get the fuck out of this house. There's a fire." And it doesn't really hit you there, right? You're like, you go into fight or flight really, really quickly. And I think I was actually in fight or flight really before that, getting Leo out. But, we had a Navy SEAL at HVLT, this guy, Rich Davini, and there's like a 2-minute, drill basically of like survival mode, right? You assess situation, you could freak out for a second, but then you have to like immediately act. And are you a father or a parent? No, are you?
Not yet. Hopefully
Not
someday.
yet, right? So like your life, you really look at life through a different lens when you have offspring and you have your kids. It's just like, yes, we're all very selfish people still, just as anyone in this world is. We're all selfish. But there's just a different level of like, oh my God, there's like literally so much more to the situation in your life than what you really think is important. So right away, I looked at it. I was just like, they said, he's like, you just went into like a Navy SEAL mode of survival, where it's like, assess the situation, freak out for a second in your head, pull it together, and then immediately go protect and save. So we got the kids out, and then, we have 2 cats and a dog. So my wife is in like her pajamas. My kids are in their pajamas, no shoes on. And it's January 17th. It's freezing out here in New York. So they run across the street to our neighbor's house. I call my parents. They live really close. So they flew down here. My brother wasn't around yet. He made his way back. He was like upstate. And I remember just like standing in the foyer, and I was fighting with the fire department because I didn't want to leave my house. And they're like, you have to get out of your house. And I'm like, I'm not leaving. Like, I'm staying here. Like, I don't know why. I just didn't want to leave. And then they pumped like literally 500,000 gallons of water into my house, dude. And, ceilings are falling and walls are collapsing. And, but at that point, I was like, all my family is straight. We're all good. I was like, fuck it. I don't even care. I cried for like a minute when I saw my dad come in the door, and I was just like a wreck. And I was just like, everyone's fine. I'm like, just take everyone back to your house. I was even like, make a fire for them because it's freezing, right? It was like crazy. Yeah, that was it. I was just like, fuck it. Everyone's safe. I don't even care. I'll be back tomorrow.
Oh man. What is the rebuilding process like? I'm assuming you had to do some serious work on the house.
Oh, the house was it was totaled, full gut reno. Now I renovated this house probably a year before that. So I'm on like my 3rd rebuild of this house. I just went through another crazy extension on this house that we put on. But yeah, so I don't know if anyone, I'm sure people who are listening have been through catastrophic events, hurricanes, floods, whatever, but it's a really tricky situation. So when this happens, an alert goes out to a system where like insurance brokers and third-party remediation groups all listen to the fire call, which is really crazy. So what I recommend, if this ever happens to anyone, fire, flood, hurricane, whatever, I recommend people getting a third-party insurance adjuster. Very important, third-party insurance adjuster. They will come in and literally inventory your whole house for you, to every sock, pen, staple, candle, anything. I mean, the binder was this big in my house of everything we had, fork, everything. And they put value on everything for you. And then they go to bat for you with the insurance company. They take a fee, which is fine because I mean, you don't even know what to do in these situations. You're like, whatever. But this is where everyone gets taken advantage of. So that goes out to all of these people, right? Because they listen to the fire call. And on that call, they'll say, like, they actually, which is wild, which my third party adjuster told me, they explain who the family is. So they said fitness, entrepreneur, Instagram influencer, and CNN correspondent. So when they hear something like that, these people think money right away. So all these people show up at my house that night that I don't know. Hey, we're here to remediate your house. We're here to help you. We're here to fix you. Here, sign this document. We'll fix it tomorrow. Luckily, my dad is very street smart and savvy. He's like, get the fuck out of here. Kicks everyone out. I'm like, who are these people? Are they here to help? You don't know because you're so vulnerable, right? So they want you in your most vulnerable position. If you sign something like this, like it happens to old people all the time, then they'll have a clause in there that you're not reading. It's at night. Usually it's dark. It's scary. It's freaky. That like you owe them all this money no matter what, or they'll take like 60% of the insurance money. So you got to be very weary of that. But the third party adjuster was great. They go to battle for you. They get you the most money possible with insurance companies. They handle all the payments with the contractors, and they really are like you. It's just a great buffer. So yeah, it's just a wild process of rebuild, and this happened during COVID too, right before COVID started. So we almost didn't get a permit to rebuild.
Crazy.
I mean, I had to make a couple phone calls, and we finally got an essential permit to build. And then we rebuilt during COVID. And it was another crazy time because I was like really in the beginning. So you're wearing masks, wearing gloves, you're freaked out. People in your old house, you're staying at a rental property, your family's away. It was crazy. But we rebuilt it, and I looked at it like it was just another opportunity now to make something better that I already had. I saw the silver lining. My family's fine. My family's safe. Now let's rebuild it to do things we couldn't do before just because we didn't. And now we finally, after this major renovation we just did this summer again, finally have made like our dream home.
It's so cool to hear that you saw the opportunity in the adversity and that there was a silver lining. And I'm curious for the infertility stuff. Do you look back and see a silver lining in that as well? Are you a better person because of that in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, I would hope to think that. I just think going through all of these things, right? Like, and it's really crazy. It's always like, it seems now since the infertility stuff, like it's everything, something's always happening. And we always like, we're fighting something, right? Some sort of adversity with crap. I think with the IVF thing, it makes you really value certain things more. And they're like our miracle children, right? Because we almost weren't able to have kids. So I think now I'm not saying people that conceive naturally might not think this way, but like when there's certain situations where I am mega stressed out with my children, or if they're really just being out of control kids, I take a step back and I'm like, wow, I almost didn't have this. So let's not react in a way where you could probably be a disaster parent. I also look at it like I have to, I almost didn't have that opportunity to have children. So like I have to do that much more, almost like paying back that debt in a way in my head, right? Like in that sense. But also like with the fire too, with almost losing something I almost couldn't have. It's very weird and freaky. I feel like I still have PTSD from it. When I see Leo, like I have these moments sometimes where I'm like, wow, I almost lost this kid. It's really freaky. And he talks about the fire too, right? Like it was really smoky in my room. And I'm like, I know. He's like, you would have not let me die, right? And I'm just like, holy fuck, like I can't have these conversations. You're 4 or 5 years old. But listen, tomorrow's not guaranteed. After this podcast is not guaranteed. And that's why I think I really try to choose and work on happiness and being thankful and just having an abundant life of happiness and love, and not try to stress out about the little shit. that really means nothing. Materialistic things, I love them. Everything everyone does, but it does not define people, does not define you. How you treat people defines you. How you treat and raise your kids define you. And it's very easy in this day and age to allow all the other crap to take over what you think might be important.
It's wild. I was just talking about this the other day, but back in 2014, 2015, I was in a car accident. Long story short, my car was totaled, flipped a couple times, and airbag went off, just like you hear in the movies, everything slowed down. I'd never felt so sad in my entire life. It was the most intense sadness, just condensed into these, 5-10 seconds. I can still smell the airbag outer that comes out. And when everything settled, I got out of the top of the car and I stood on the sidewalk. I looked at everything and I realized that I was totally fine. And I wish I could bottle up that feeling and just take a whiff every morning, from a mason jar, because nothing mattered. None of my problems mattered. I didn't care what was in my bank account. I didn't care what I had to do later that day. I was okay. And I had a chance to see my loved ones. And that was it. So it's powerful. And I think death is something that people have trouble talking about, but there's this Latin phrase, memento mori, that says, remember, you must die. And it's just a beautiful reminder that life is precious, and it's precious because it's fragile, and it's not forever, So
Yeah, I mean, listen, like my dad had and I can't imagine going through something like that. My dad had quadruple bypass, and that was a really scary situation because it came out of like left field for us, and him having a real second chance at life and seeing how he's turned around a lot of situations. Not that he was just a shitty eater, and was able to actually show it okay, but inside he was deteriorating and all that shit. Now he has a second chance at life, and he's 70 and he's really healthy and looks great. But I think a lot of people get so wrapped up with the day-to-day bullshit and the day-to-day fitting in and wanting to be accepted. And I'm not even talking about social media. I'm just talking about just in general, that they lose track of what's really important. And like I said, I almost didn't have children and I almost lost my child. So just like, I do not care when my kids wake me up in the middle of the night. I do not care when Lukey is screaming my name for me to cuddle with him and sleep in his Batman bed at 4 times a night, right? Like, I'm just like, fuck it. Like, this is awesome. It's temporary. I'm not going to get these moments again. And if there's any young parents on here and stuff, and I talk to my friends and, and they're stressed out about their kids and I'm not sleeping and this and that. Yeah, it's okay to bitch and moan about it for a second, but like, you literally only get like 18 summers with your kids, maybe less, right? From up until like 5, 6, 7 years old, like that's the sweet spot. Because after that, they don't want to hang out with you. They don't want to see you. They want to be with their friends. This is when they're your best friends right now, right? Obviously, when you get older, you get a different relationship, but like, the time is so limited now with them that you have to embrace it. You have to love it. And you just have to, kind of challenge yourselves to be a winner in that situation.
It's a great message. And so everything we talked about so far, those are things you didn't get to choose. On the flip side, what's the hardest thing that you've ever chose to do on purpose, and why have you done that thing?
It was actually like brutally difficult that I did on purpose. I ran the Empire State Building steps in that race. That was hell. I never talk about that because it was so quick, but it was brutal. But I did a 50-mile ultra. And I don't want to sound like it really wasn't that difficult, but I think the difficulty in that was the mental side of it, of training, of just the monotony of doing it every single day. And I run the same route, so it's kind of my fault anyway, but like I run the same single route every single day. It goes on forever, but like, I can break it up to 4 miles, 20 miles, 40 miles, whatever. So it was just that mindset of doing something consistent every single day. And, while you're training for that, you're running some, and not, again, everything is perception. Everything is relative to who you are, right? For me to run 90 miles a week is a lot. Some people, that's Not a lot. So, I've had conversations with people who are like, dude, 90 miles, that's really not that much. I'm like hitting 200 miles a week. I'm like, wow. Or some people are like, dude, I can't even run 3 miles a week. So think about that, right? So that was difficult. The day of running the 50 was not that difficult. I see your shirt, Nick and I are really good buddies, and we spoke the whole time during training, and he was actually on FaceTime and on the call during my run with my wife and everything. So he was really helpful in that, but that was difficult. I think, I tore my Achilles actually. This was adversity too. I tore my Achilles a week before my first son was born. So dealing with that and rehabbing 4 days a week, that was really bad too. So that was just, I knew my ankle and calf were a little jammed up, but I still continued to play soccer, and it was only a matter of time until something was going to go, and it happened to be my Achilles. So I kind of could say maybe I did that myself, but that rehab was really hard for 13 months, 4 days a week. That was just brutal. Going to the city every day, leaving, having to get that done and go to work and then come home late and that. But yeah, the 50 miler was just a mental thing of just commitment. But, you learn so much about yourself in these situations. Like, you literally could do anything, like you just have to do it and show up and focus. And I think a lot of people miss that message. A lot of people don't want to put the work in. They want to take the easy way out, and that's fine for them. But for me, it was like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it well. I want to do it where I'm not dying, where I can excel at it and enjoy most of it. There were times where it was difficult, but, I didn't stop, banged it out, 7 hours, 25 minutes, 50 miles. And, I raised $81,000 for infertility, so people can have an opportunity to go through the IVF process if they couldn't financially afford it, because it is pretty expensive. But yeah, I would say that was the hardest part. And then during this renovation, living at home with 2 little kids and GCing and managing this whole project, self-inflicting hell. But we got through it. That was a very hard time. And actually, I felt like I put a post up about this, right? I got a little depressed this summer through it, because I felt like I was putting my family into another situation that they didn't ask for. And just dealing with the noise and the dust and all the workers all the time. And it was kind of like, is this for you or is this for them? And it kind of weighed on me a lot this summer. And towards the end of it, I was like, this renovation has to fucking end. I just can't take it anymore. But now it's finally done, and the space is great, and the kids are just loving everything. So little things like that, but nothing that I've really put myself through that, is too crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. With all of that, right? Whether it's training for the 50 miler, whether it's the renovation or even the rehab with the Achilles, right? Life gets thrown out of balance when you choose to pursue certain things. And selfishly, as a married man, I'd love to hear your take on this. Everything's a trade-off in my eyes. And if it's me working late, if it's me going on training runs, if it's me doing X, Y, or Z to move the business forward, that in some way, shape, or form takes away from time that I get to spend with my wife. It takes away from other relationships. And I almost view balance as just managing seasons of imbalance. And I'd love to hear your take, because clearly you have a lot to manage.
Yeah, listen, like, it's a tough conversation here in my house all the time with my wife and myself. It's a big place of beef and contention of like my training and all that stuff, right? I look at it like it's my job. She looks at it like sometimes maybe you could do it at a different time. Which I understand both sides of it, but then I'm just like, this is what I have to get done. I think, in anything you want to do and be successful at and win at, there comes sacrifice. And it's not forgiving, and it's not loyal. And I say that it's not loyal because if you don't consistently work at it, it's going to go to the next person. Doesn't matter who you are, and it doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't favor anybody. So, and if you want to win, you have to understand that it's not loyal to you, that you have to constantly chase that ability to be successful and try to win at it. No one is successful in this world doing nothing and being lazy. That's just the bottom line. So there's going to be a point where something has to give. There's going to be a point where something has to be neglected in a way. But that's where it's really important to do everything else in your life to set yourself up, where maybe that, yeah, it's going to consume a lot of time, but what other areas in your life can you sort out so everything else isn't a disaster and everything else isn't so time consuming? Like, can you get up earlier than your kids, which I highly recommend parents doing, or at least one parent doing? Can you get up 2 hours before your kids and get as much done as possible? If it's training, if it's emails, if it's making their bottles, making their breakfast, making their lunch for school, can you do all of that so you can have at least some alone time and get everything done? So when they do wake up, you're not sacrificing time. That's how I've always operated. Is it not drinking anymore and getting hungover and drunk? I don't understand how parents can be hungover and be parents. I just don't. It would be hell if I was hungover and my kids are running, jumping, chasing, throwing, screaming. Right? What are you doing in your life that is allowing you to really focus and be present on certain times, where if you weren't doing that, you can't have everything. So you can't grow the business, do everything else. But then when you have to be on for your kids and you're distracted. You need to be able to be totally clear, have clarity, and focus on it. But as we all know, if you want to be successful in anything, it's going to take sacrifice and it's going to take neglect in something.
Yeah. Yeah. There's only so much time in a day. And I think that's a great way to look at it. And I guess I would transition to this next question, which is just ultimately, right? You work so hard at all the things that you do. Do you have an end goal that you're pursuing, or do you have a grand vision that you're chasing? Or is it just day by day, step by step, see what happens?
Well, I mean, that question, it could be looked at like, what's the vision for the business, right? We could say, what's the plan for the business? Well, raising capital right now, we know now just from data and the brands that we work with and the people who attend and the repeats and the new people coming for HPLT, that this can be scalable and it should be bigger than it is. So we're in the process of raising money for that. So yes, growing that at scale is the goal. Overall, the main goal for business wise is I want to start really getting into the flipping and building and developing business. I love interior design. I designed the house. I built the house. I used to do that with all my restaurants. So I really love that aspect of it. And I really enjoy it. So I hopefully am going to buy my first property this year and start there. But I want to be able to continue to do what I'm doing at a high octane, high quality pace for as long as I possibly can. And I'm pretty certain that can happen as long as I continue to check off the boxes and do everything I possibly can to stay as healthy and young as I possibly can. So that's it. I want to be that 60, 70-year-old dad still running and working out and having fun. I'm still a really big kid at heart. My wife will tell you that. She's like, you're younger than your children. But I love being like that, and I love to laugh. I just want to continue to train, have fun, be in environments where like-minded people are always there. And that's where I feel like I'm most creative and really most happy. So that's it. I want to coach my kids 100%. I want to coach. I love soccer still. I'd love to get into coaching eventually. So yeah, just got to make a couple more bucks so then we can continue to do that.
Yeah. And so all of that obviously requires endurance to go the distance, to find a sustainable pace, to chase those things. So when you hear the word endurance, what does that mean to you?
Endurance means to me, how long can you go without tapping out? That's what it really means to me. That's why I love running now. I used to hate running. I love it now because it's just me out there. I don't run with music. I just listen to the surrounding environment, listen to my body, listen to my heartbeat, my feet. So endurance to me is just like I just said, how long can I continue to do this at a high level. And, I think I learned a lot through that 50-mile training and the 50-mile run and running marathons and doing all these things. It's like, how long can you go? And it's a constant work in progress. So endurance to me is how long can you go as a work in progress.
I like that a lot. And obviously you do a lot of strength training, or at least it seems like you do. How do you balance those two things?
So I lift with Jacob Zemer, my trainer, 3 days a week. So the breakdown would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday with him lifting heavy. And then I run 6 days a week. So adding those 3 days, now it's all personal, right? That works for me, works for my body type, and works for allowing me to continue to run and not fatigued too much where my runs start to suffer. But we have a really good cadence and good flow right now with everything. So I think it's essential if you want a certain aesthetic, which I need for work and business, to look a certain way and be able to perform a certain way, that the 3 days works really well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got two more questions for you.
Yep.
One is pretty simple, but in the realm of endurance, in the realm of fitness, do you have anything in your sights that you're still hoping to pursue at some point in the near future, but haven't yet?
Yeah. So we have another 50 we have to do, and most likely 100. Bang that out. We did the 400-pound deadlift, under 60-second 400 meter run. We did accomplish that. We're toying right now doing the 1,000-pound lift in under 5-minute mile, under 30 minutes. So that would be, you could break it up into 3 different things: squat, deadlift, bench, and then immediately into a sub 5-minute mile. We might do that. We're just figuring timing wise with life and kids and all that crap. That's really it.
That's pretty cool. Taking Adam Klink to another level there with the 1,000 pounds and a sub 5-minute mile in 30 minutes. What would your breakdown theoretically be of bench, squat, and dead?
We were talking about it actually 2 days ago. What was it? It was probably a 400-pound or 450 deadlift, 300 bench, and or maybe more on the deadlift. Maybe just bang out a 500-pound deadlift quick, one rep, and then break the squat and the push maybe evenly there, just to be easy. And then try to just take like maybe a 5-minute break and then go right into it. I don't know what did Klink do? I don't know.
So he did the 500-pound back squat and sub 5-minute mile in the same day, I believe. So he was the first person to do that. And then I'm going
to try to do 1,000 pounds and the sub 5-minute in 30 minutes.
Gotcha.
That's going to be hell. Yeah. I mean, I think like the lifting aspect of it won't be so difficult. I think you could bang that out if you give yourself, you have 30 minutes, right? So you could probably give yourself a minute or 2-minute break in between each. Get that done.
Yeah.
And then the 5-minute.
Have you run a sub 5-minute mile ever?
Yeah. I think I ran a 5:18 or 5:20. But you're moving, dude. You're like flying. And I'm not big, but I'm not little. So, 192 right now. It's a heavy piano on your back to crush that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of wrap things up here, Brian, this is my favorite question. And you're a father, you've got 2 sons. And so maybe you think of this as speaking to them at some point in the future, but everybody goes through something, right? And whether we see it on the surface or not, people out there are fighting these battles. And there might be some people listening to this podcast who they're not sure what to do next. Maybe they're not sure where to turn, and they're just feeling down, and you get to speak to them, or someday you just get to speak to your sons, as I'm sure you will. If that's the case and somebody's really struggling, what would you say to them?
The sun rises tomorrow, and the sun will always rise tomorrow. So knowing that, you have to take each day and break it up into small little departments and just try to fight. If it's minute by minute, hour by hour, whatever you got to do, don't rush it and just go as slow as you need to go. And tomorrow the sun will come up. And as long as you can make little wins and a little progression at what you're doing, hopefully you'll be able to get through a lot of your issues and problems. And on the non-empathetic side of the conversation, you can also tell people someone probably has it a lot worse than you. So you can look at it from two ways. The empathetic side of it of saying, okay, we understand you got problems. I understand you're going through something. Now let's try to climb out of it, dig out of it, but go slow. Have small wins, set yourself up for success if you can. But also on the other side of things, someone probably has it a lot worse than you. Snap out of it a little bit and start showing up and going forward.
Well said. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sure it's reaching, if not one person, many people who needed that message. And so I just to really close things out here, Brian, if people want to find out more about what you do, they want to check out your businesses, if they want to reach out and just thank you for being on the podcast, where should they find you? What's the best place?
I think the best way is through IG, which is my full name. That's probably just the quickest and easiest access where, I'm on it all the time and I can at least get back to you. And if there's a conversation that needs to be had, it can just move off the platform to text, call, or email. But that's the best way. That's where we keep everyone updated. It's where we're just explaining everything we're trying to do and trying to keep it real and relevant. And we're not the fastest, we're not the biggest, we're not the strongest, we're not this and that. We're just a normal dude going through life 1 minute, 1 second at a time.
Well, Brian, I appreciate everything you do. I'm thankful for this conversation.
Thank you. It's great chatting.
Yeah, man. Can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you again.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.